Hi everybody, my name is Victoria and I am a fine art artist, illustrator, and art teacher, and welcome to our very first series of art tutorials. Today what we're going to talk about is how to shade and a few things you need to know about shading and also hatching and all the other different steps that would help you out and improve your shading, or if you're just kind of starting out, this will be a very helpful video for you. So I'll kind of walk you guys through a little bit on what materials you need, what is hatching, and the two types of hatching that we'll be doing, which is straight and curved hatching, how to apply layers to make darker tones, how to blend, also getting to know our value tones a lot better, and learning how to use different directions for different surfaces of objects. Now that's pretty much for intros, so let's get started now. So what we'll need first is some type of paper. I use Strathmore Sketch paper, and we will also need some type of pencil, and mechanical pencil works pretty good, and also some type of eraser. I use Monami dust-free eraser, and you can also use a traditional HB pencil, that would also work as well. So the first thing we need to know is what is hatching, or to be more precisely, what is shading. Now, hatching is just a way to fill in shading so that you get a variety of different gray tones to create a realistic look to whatever you're filling in. So whether if it's a portrait or a animal or any type of objects. Now, the steps to create hatching is basically a whole bunch of straight lines put side by side together to create a patch. So now we have a patch of gray tone. Now you want to make sure that the patches of hatching, or more precisely the strokes of lines, kind of stay quite close together in order to create a neatly patched tone, but you can also kind of play around with how many spacing you want in between. And there are also two types of hatching. One is straight hatching, and then the other one is curved hatching. So let's start with a vertical straight hatching. So as you can see, I am having all the strokes moving downwards, and as you can see, the spacing in between is quite even. I'm going to draw an arrow just to kind of show you which direction it's going, and you can also do straight hatching to the side as well. So these are all considered straight hatching, whether if you're going top to bottom. Now this is from left to right, and you kind of see that we kind of start at the very left side, and they're always going from left. They start from left and they go to right. And now we're going to do something that's very similar, but just the opposite direction. It's kind of going from the right to the left. Next, what we're going to do here is some type of diagonal hatching. As you can see, it's kind of going from top to bottom, so top right corner to the bottom left corner, and then also this area we have the vice versa, the opposite from bottom to top. Now, as you can see, it's pretty even between the hatchings over here, but over here, there's suddenly a little bit of too much of a gap. So when you're creating spacing in between, you can make bigger gaps like this, or you can also do more thinner gaps, or basically no gaps. They're pretty much sticking all together. Next up is curved hatching. So curved hatching kind of works in a very similar way. The only difference is that it's curved. Yeah, nothing too surprising. So what happens here is that we're going to kind of draw one line for the letter C, and as you can see, my lines are kind of sticking very close to the previous line. And this would create a circular shape. So this would be actually very good for cylindrical shapes here. I'm drawing an arrow so that you guys can see a little bit better. Now let's do this direction. So when you're practicing, sometimes it's kind of good to draw the direction first, and then that way it'll be easier for you to direct to the point that you want it to end at. So here's another type of curved hatching. And let's see. Let's do this way. That's a weird one. So now it's kind of curving top to bottom. So definitely the place where you start with your curved hatching is very important to where it ends. And as you can see, it's always going in a similar direction. Now there is another type of shading, and which I usually call it scribbles, or kind of like scribbling. So what this is that you usually kind of color it in a way. So you kind of go side to side basically, and you kind of start there, and as you can see, my pencil did not leave the paper, and it's kind of just going back and forth. And this one is a little bit harder to control. I usually recommend my students to do the hatching because you already start on one side instead of the other, and as you can see, the edges are a lot darker than it is at the center part. So what happens is this would actually create harder transition if you were to kind of connect larger patches together. And you can use this, but I usually just kind of stay away from it unless if you're very good at controlling the hatching. So I would usually recommend doing hatching because, as you can see, you always start from the bottom, and as I'm directing upwards, you can make it thicker and skinnier, and you have way more control, and it always starts on that bottom end. So next, there's also another one that's kind of like a circular scribble. And with this one, it's kind of similar. So basically, I would kind of categorize these as detached and non-detached ones. So this one, it's a similar thing where you kind of don't take the pencil off of the paper. It's always on the surface, and you're just kind of like scribbling in circular motions. And as you can see, it's a lot darker at the center over here, and with this type of thing, if you can't control it very well, it can be really tricky. So, but feel free to try different stuff and see what works best for you. So let's talk about layering now. What we're going to do here is I'm gonna kind of teach you a little bit on how to create layers to make your tones a lot darker. Whoops, sorry for the blurriness over there. So basically we got the first layer on the left, and as you can see, I'm adding my second layer over here. And what happens is that once you add your second layer, you want to make sure you kind of keep both layers very light, and it's the same amount of pressure that you would add onto your pencil. And same thing for layer 3. I'm adding first layer, and my camera just don't want to focus. I'm adding second layer and then third layer. I kind of added like a little extra one just to kind of make it darker though. But as you can see, for each layer that you add, from the first one to the second one and the third one, it gets darker and darker very gradually. So make sure you keep your layer is very light, and then that way it will be so much easier to kind of control, because you're kind of going little bit by little, because the moment you kind of go way past the tone that you need and it goes like way too dark, then you have to kind of start erasing and all that, which isn't like the best way of doing things. So you'd rather go like less is better. You can always make it darker as you add more layers. I know you guys want to go super dark all the way at the very beginning, but please keep it light. Now, the next thing is we're gonna learn how to blend. Yay, this is the fun part. So let's do 2 patches first. I'm layering as I usually do. And you kind of want to make sure that you add quite a bit of hatching over it. You need some type of shading before you add any type of blending, because you need to blend something, right? So there's patch number 1, patch number 2, Scribble, scribble, scribble. Okay, and now here are our weapons, or tools to be exact. So we have very soft watercolor brushes, or they can also be synthetic. I got these at the dollar store. They can be very cheap brushes. You don't have to buy anything that's super expensive, but have a nice variety. You got like a thick one, a medium one, a small one. And when you're blending, make sure you kind of go in a hatching method. So when I usually say hatching method is that it always starts from top to bottom. And as you can see, it always starts back at the top and goes to the bottom again. So you want to kind of prevent from like going back and forth like a crazy person, just kind of blend. And even my camera is not like keeping up with the blending there, but like you can blend that way, but it seems like you do a better job if you were to blend from top to bottom. Let's do another hatch over here, and then what happens is that you want to make sure you kind of blend per layer, and what happens is that you're kind of filling in the gaps of the paper. So sometimes you have like these little white spots, and then what happens is paper usually has a type of groove or a kind of texture and tooth. So what would happen is that sometimes the first blending in the first layer usually doesn't cover up everything, so you would want to go for a second layer, and then once you have your second layer, you added your hatching, and then you kind of blend again. And then this will kind of gradually build it up, but just be careful and be mindful. Like if you need a lighter area, you probably don't want to add the extra layer of hatching, but if you do, for example, for this dark spot, whoa, out of focus. Yeah, for that dark spot, you would want to kind of have another layer. Yeah. No, that's too high. Yeah, there you go. So what we're going to talk about next is value tones. So what value tones are is basically you have a scale of gray tones from black all the way to white. And then what usually happens here is that you want to make sure that you have a very gradual gradation. So it kind of gradually goes from darker and gets lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter until it kind of becomes completely white, because white is the lightest part that you probably get, and you would probably just keep that as the white of the paper. And sometimes you probably want to add a lot more layers in order to make the darker areas darker, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in like one go. You can actually go back to add more layers so that you kind of gradually build the value tones. The key idea with value tones is that you want to make sure that you have a good variety of different value tones, because depending on like how much value tones you have, it will kind of help you create a three-dimensional and realistic look to it. So you would probably want a value tone from 1 to 10, and that usually we would call it the Munsell scale. I will kind of link another video for the Munsell scale and specifically about value tones so that you kind of learn a little bit better and get a little bit more details about it though, but I'll kind of show you how you would actually use the value tones and the value scale as you practice your drawings. But that's for another day. We're going to concentrate on a little bit on the value tones right here today and how to fill in shading. So basically what I'm doing right now is that I am kind of dividing the different value tones, and you can kind of fill in these little blocks of rectangles or like squares. These are rectangles, and this would kind of give you an idea of like the difference between each value. Now let's talk about direction of hatching. So direction of hatching actually plays a very important role when it comes to shading and hatching, because it kind of tells us how this object that we're filling in is shaped like. So whether if it's a flat surface or if it's a curved surface. So let me finish drawing this little cube over here. And what we would want to keep in mind is that since the cube is a flat surface, we can actually use the edges, or like the direction of the line on the edge of the cube, to kind of help us kind of guess what direction we could probably use for the cube. Now, since the cube is a flat surface, and we need a light source, so let's draw a little sun here. Okay, so next thing we're going to do here is that we're gonna actually start our hatching from the side over here, and the reason why I'm doing a diagonal hatching is that since there is perspective in a three-dimensional shape for this cube, for example, things kind of tend to go a little bit further away when it's not as close to us, right? The diagonal hatching would support that illusion of a realistic cube. And as you can see, I'm adding a lot of the darker tones at the very top, because that side, it's closer to where the light source is, but since it's already turned away all the way to the other side, none of the light source will actually reach here in the back, so this area would be very much concentrated with a lot of shadows, probably mostly because it's also considered a core shadow, since we have a very straight and sharp edge. Let's see. Next, what we're going to do here is the other side of the cube, and as you can see, I'm going as light as possible. So this one, we're kind of using the opposite direction, still diagonal, but as you can see, this side is a lot lighter just because it's not exactly in the direct lighting of our little sun there, but at the same time, we would still have a teeny bit of shadow at the bottom, not as intense as the one on the left side. And now for a curved object. So what we're going to draw here is a circle, and we are going to turn this into a sphere. Woo! So what's going to happen with this one is you're probably and most definitely going to use curved hatching. No straight hatching for this one. You can though, but I would recommend using curved hatching because it would actually create a better result in the end and make it look more like a realistic sphere. So now I drew a mini sphere on the side just to kind of show you the direction of our hatching. So as you can see, all these arrows kind of curving from the right to the left, and that's how we're going to apply our hatching here. And make sure you kind of curve it gradually, because it doesn't curve as intensely as you think, depending on how big the sphere is. You probably want to make sure that it kind of follows the shape. And as you can see, if you kind of go a little bit lower, you probably want to rotate the direction and the angle of your hatching, and we will probably as well add, oh wait, gotta sharpen. Okay, and you would probably want to add some type of crossed hatching, so a combination of different curved hatching directions and combining that together so that everything would kind of blend and mold together into one surface, one smooth surface. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to add a little bit more layers so it kind of makes it a little bit darker on that one side. And oh wait, let's blend as well. So usually when it comes to blending, you would probably want to add like a layer or two, and once you have that, then you're good to go to do a little bit of blending before you add another third layer to make certain areas a lot darker. So let's blend. Wee. Okay. And as you can see, like the darker parts over here, and we have like a really light area over to the left. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to add slightly bit more shadow over here, and we're going to kind of create that cross hatching now. So we kind of added a little bit of cross hatching earlier because of the base of the sphere, but now we're going to actually officially add a complete different direction. Now it's more like a top to bottom curve instead of from a right to left curve. And as you can see, I'm adding majority of the shadows at the bottom right corner because the light source is from the top left, and we are also going to blend after when we added this new layer. Yeah, and just like a few more touch-ups over here. But you can kind of like go back and forth since you have way more control adding light layers one at a time and also blending and making things smooth with your brush. And a lot of the times, if any of the areas that are like super light shadow, you can actually go ahead and use your brush to directly add the hatching there. Because sometimes you have enough graphite residual in your brush, so you can actually just go ahead and blend directly with just the brush here. Since, as you can see, we kind of blend a lot of the darker parts, and the brush is literally black at the tips, so there's a lot of graphite in there for you to actually create a very light shadow. Let me just touch up this bottom part of the sphere just a little bit more and just kind of polish it off. So as you can see, it's kind of like add hatching, then blend with the brush, and if it's not dark enough, then you add more hatching and you blend with the brush again until you kind of get to the result that you want. Yeah, so it's like a back and forth process, and as you get more familiar with it, you'll get a better idea of how much to add and which directions to use. So that concludes today's episode for our brand new tutorials. I hope everybody learned something new about hatching and shading, and hopefully these tips will help you improve your shading skills and just kind of give you a open mind to see what the different types of hatching and shading there are. And I really wanted to thank one of my students for actually suggesting to make this very first video about shading, because she wanted to learn a little bit more about shading hatching just because she's kind of starting off and didn't really know where to start off. So I hope this was super helpful for you. Thank you again, Linnea. And yeah, so thanks again for watching, everybody, and I hope you guys liked the new step-by-step tutorial. If you guys have any questions or suggestions on other tutorial videos that you would like to see in the future, please remember to comment below. I'll be more than happy to help you guys out and give you some tips and advice to help you improve your drawing skills. If you guys like this video, please remember to hit the like button, and also if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe so you can get the latest update when I release a new art video, which I am technically releasing every week, so stay tuned for new awesome videos coming out. I'll see you guys next time, so make sure to remember to stay creative, have fun, and draw what you love. Okay, see you guys again. Thanks, bye-bye.